Hi, this is Nelson, and today we have a very unusual video for you. Usually we talk about what's coming in prophecy and end times in terms of what we've gotten right. Today, we're going to take it from a little bit different standpoint. What might happen if we've got it wrong? I think this is an extremely important point. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. It's a very unique concept that I think almost no one in prophecy circles is taking into account. Let's begin with a question that I was asked at the recent prophecy conference that Marquis Laughlin and I did in Flint, Texas. And watch how we answer the question from this young lady.
Hello. Okay. I have always been taught that the rapture is before the tribulation. But what I hear you saying is you have a little bit of tribulation and then the rapture and then a little bit of more.
Right. That's
So
called the
middle.
pre-wrath rapture of the church. That's probably a much longer question than could be answered by, in fact, there's lots of discussion. If you actually believe in the pre-tribulation rapture of the church, that's perfectly okay. But I have a suggestion. And the suggestion is be prepared for the worst, and in your case, hope for the best. So, if there is a pre-trib rapture of the church, everybody in this room will say hallelujah. There's no question that everybody would be very excited about that, because that means even the seals are things we wouldn't endure. However, the question I ask to everybody about the pre-trib rapture church is, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong, and what happens to those in your church if you're wrong? So the best advice I can give anybody that is pre-trib is hope for the best, prepare for the worst, prepare as if you're going to face those things, and then if you don't, you could just see, I told you, you were not right about that. And I will agree. I'll say, yep, I guess I wasn't.
I hope you enjoyed that, but let's take a look at that chapter from my new upcoming book, How to Prepare for the Last Days. Again, it's called Hope for the Best, but that's the title of the chapter. Let's give it a listen. How to Prepare for the Last Days, Chapter 8. Hope for the best, but... We now come to the most challenging chapter in the entire book. It's the most challenging because it may cause you to reconsider your most deeply held theories about how you should prepare for the last days. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. This is good advice in almost all life situations. The phrase goes all the way back to around 46 BC when Cicero wrote to a friend saying, quote, "You must hope for the best," end of quote. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with hoping. However, there is a lot wrong with not preparing for the worst. That is why we purchase insurance. We have spoken of hurricanes throughout this book as a symbol for the last days. The real-life Hurricane Florence, however, took the roof right off my house. Luckily, I had prepared for the worst and had bought insurance, and because of the insurance, we were able to fix our roof. Insurance is a great example of preparing for the worst. And in terms of the last days, I suggest you insure yourself as well. What do we mean by that? Can you just buy a policy for that? No, but the principle is the same. In our Christian society today, there are lots of opinions about what will happen in the future. But we need to remember that these are all theories. And usually, each theory has 3 or 4 opposing theories on what will happen. This is why there is so much debate in the church and online about issues like the timing of the rapture or the ethnic identity of the Antichrist. Wonderful, spirit-filled scholars support each of these various positions. Scholars who've spent years studying and researching, but yet after all that study, the scholars still disagree with each other. This should tell us that these are very complex theories and not easily decided. How would you ensure yourself in regard to these type of last day issues? Well, you should hope for the best, but after reading and studying, you should continue to believe what you feel inside is the right opinion. But you should also prepare for the worst. You should prepare as if the other theories could be correct. In other words, you should prepare yourself, your family, your church, as if you are mistaken. I told you this was going to be challenging. Unfortunately, the heated nature of the discussion of prophetic issues online seems to make this almost impossible in today's culture. The emotions run so high on the two issues we mentioned above, rapture and Antichrist, that most Christians cannot see clearly enough to realize that insurance is just a common sense way to protect yourself. I'm right. No, I'm right, the opposing sides say. What should have been a discussion unfortunately evolves into arguments, where it seems that their being right or winning the debate is more important than what is biblically true. If you follow Christian discussions online, I'm sure you've seen this for yourself. I know scholars who have been called satanic by nationally renowned pastors simply because they believe something different about the last days than the pastor. I'm injecting this now. This is not part of the book, but I happen to have been called satanic by several nationally known pastors because I believe something different about the rapture than they did. I also know other Christian leaders who have lost their jobs in ministry because they stood on the convictions of what they believed about the last days. These things are horrible examples of how our Christian culture can get completely out of hand. If we're honest with ourselves, none of us can say we are 100% sure that the viewpoints we favor will take place exactly the way we envision them. In fact, given the vast division in the church and the biblical history about issues like this, I can say that these things will almost certainly happen in ways that will surprise us. So we all need to hold our viewpoints loosely because we could easily be mistaken. Mistaken? Please remember that in the first century, at Jesus' first coming, nearly everyone was mistaken. The religious leaders were mistaken, the disciples were mistaken, and the regular citizens were mistaken. Everyone was mistaken and misunderstood what the Old Testament prophecies were really saying about Jesus. Isn't it possible that we will be just as mistaken about his second coming? Key point. None of us know what the future holds with 100% accuracy, so we should prepare for all contingencies. Let's look at a few examples. For instance, let's say a person favors a position that there is no rapture, based on their studies and reading. Shouldn't they also prepare spiritually as if the rapture could happen any day? Imagine not being spiritually prepared to meet Jesus today. Note, we should all be prepared to meet Jesus each and every day because of our own mortality, not just because of the rapture. So insurance for this person who doesn't believe in the rapture is also preparing that a rapture could happen at any time. Prepare for both contingencies. And the opposite is also true. If a person favors a position that the rapture will occur prior to the tribulation, the 70th week of Daniel, they think that believers will not endure the Antichrist. This person should also be prepared to face the Antichrist and the persecutions of the Great Tribulation. That is preparing for the worst. Imagine having your family face the Antichrist and the mark of the beast if you haven't even prepared them. However, even if Christians don't face the Antichrist himself, this also doesn't mean that they won't face other evil men who may also persecute them and force them into economic systems that restrict buying and selling. These things could happen before the Antichrist also. The last few years have taught us that that is a real possibility. Key point: all believers should prepare to both meet Jesus today and at the same time prepare to face the Antichrist. And most importantly of all, if you've disagreed with every word written in this book so far, please still prepare as if we are the final generation. You may think that Jesus isn't coming anytime soon, but you should still prepare for the worst because you may be mistaken. We can all be mistaken. That is the point. I know what you're thinking. I'm sure my view of the rapture, Antichrist, etc. is 100% correct. My pastor and denomination believe so too. And maybe they are correct. However, there are just as many pastors and denominations who believe differently. If you're correct, they're mistaken. If they're correct, you're mistaken. Remember the first coming. The religious leaders like me got it all wrong. In the spirit of humility, we should provide insurance for our families and churches that perhaps our understanding of these issues are flawed in some ways. And given that the impact of being wrong about the return of Jesus is so high, it's eternally dangerous if we're wrong. The smart and safe thing to do is to prepare as if you're right and prepare as if you're wrong. Prepare both ways. There's no downside to this type of preparation. There is only upside, that you will truly be ready for Jesus no matter what the future holds. Key point: prepare for all contingencies in regard to the return of Jesus. You can still favor your views on these topics. You did a lot of study on this issue. Your pastor and denomination did lots of study. And you were probably right. Probably, but not assuredly. So hope for the best, which is your view, and prepare for the worst, which is the other view. Prepare for them both. And if you are in church leadership, you carry this responsibility for the entire small group, congregation, or even denomination that follow you. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment, for we all stumble in many things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. James 3, 1, 2, and 5. If you are a church leader, or even if you just post about eschatology on the internet, this is a frightening passage. Are you that certain of your opinion that you will risk the lives and souls of those entrusted to you? An entire forest of Christians can be burned up if you or I get these things wrong. Isn't it safer to ensure our thoughts by preparing for all contingencies on these matters rather than being prideful that we know better than other scholars and leaders?